right? So Kimi K3 just dropped, and people are calling it a coding beast, but GLM 5.2 is sitting right there ready to fight. S3A Marathon K3 scores 42, GLM 5.2 scores 13, and that gap is real. Both models dropped in mid-2026, and the space is moving fast. So this comparison matters right now. I'm running Kimi K3 against GLM 5.2 across 4 real tests: coding, long context, Chinese language, and inference speed. Verified sources only, no vendor spin. And yeah, if you're running high volume API calls, the cost difference between these two could genuinely wreck your unit economics. So which one you pick changes that bill by a lot. I'm not going to tell you which wins yet though. So this comparison is really for 2 kinds of people. Anyone building agentic coding pipelines where the model has to grind through long multi-step tasks without falling apart, and anyone running production inference at scale where output token costs and API reliability actually show up on a bill. If neither of those is you, honestly, take this with a grain of salt. Test 1 is coding and math benchmarks. And when a model fails here, it's not abstract. Your agent gets stuck mid-task, writes broken code it can't debug, and you're either babysitting it manually or the whole run craters, which means hours of compute wasted and a bill with nothing to show for it. So this one's pretty important to get right. What surprised me here is how wide the gap gets on the agentic stuff. On SWE Marathon, K3 scores 42.0 while GLM 5.2 sits at 13.0, which is not close. And on Frontiers WE, K3 hits 81.2 and GLM 5.2 lands at 74.4. The math scores come from different evaluators and different model versions. So I'm not calling a math winner here. Okay, so before I call this, a couple of caveats. The math scores AIMA and MATH 500 come from community blogs and different model versions tested by different people. So that part of the comparison is honestly pretty soft. And on SWE Bench Verified, K3 is at 76.8%, while an earlier GLM 5 version hit 77.8%, which means that specific subtest is basically a wash. K3 takes test 1. I was expecting a closer fight across the board, but that SWE Marathon gap, 42 to 13, is hard to argue with, and K3 leads on Deep SWE, Program Bench, Frontier SWE, and Terminal Bench 2, so it's not a one benchmark fluke. That puts K3 up 1-0 on the scoreboard. Test 2 is long context document understanding, and the failure mode here is really specific. You feed the model a massive document, it reads the first chunk fine, but somewhere in the middle, it starts losing track of details that weren't mentioned recently. So you get answers that sound right, but miss something buried on page 40. That's the kind of error that's hard to catch until it costs you. So I looked at what's actually published here, and both models match at 1 million tokens of context window, but K3 has an independent AALCR accuracy score of 74.7% from artificial analysis, while GLM 5.2 has no published long context accuracy number at all. K3 also ranks number 2 of 32 on BenchLM multimodal, and GLM 5.2 simply has no equivalent figure to put next to it. Now, GLM 5.2's index share architecture cuts per token compute by 2.9 times at 1 million context, which is a real efficiency claim. It just doesn't have an accuracy benchmark behind it yet. And Kimi's own docs flagged that quality can drift on the least referenced parts of very long inputs. So K3 isn't perfect here either. The data gap makes this one hard to score cleanly. This one's a tie. And honestly, I was expecting to hand it to K3 pretty easily given the scores, but you can't call a winner when one side has no published accuracy number to compare against. K3 has more evidence on record, but that's not the same as winning, so the scoreboard stays at K3-1. GLM 5.2 with 1 tied. Test 3 is Chinese language performance, and the concrete failure here is you pick the wrong model for a Chinese language product, and it either misreads nuance in user inputs or writes output that sounds off to native speakers, which is a customer trust problem, not just a benchmark problem. For both of these models, Chinese language is supposed to be a core strength. So this one really should have clear data. What surprised me here is that neither team has published CEVAL or CMLU scores, which are the most requested Chinese language benchmarks. And I was expecting at least one of them to have that data. What we do have is K3 at 89.2% on MLU from a community blog and GLM 5 at 91.72% from Layerlens, but those are different model versions tested by different people. So you can't really stack those numbers directly. GLM's heritage traces directly to Tsinghua University's NLP research, and Chinese language was a core design goal from day one, while K3 is built for Chinese users too. But the documentation on that is thinner. That context matters if you're picking a model for Chinese language workflows. Even though neither model has given us the benchmark numbers to make a clean call right now, another tie. And I'll be honest, this one frustrated me a little because both of these are prominent Chinese AI products and neither team published CEVAL or CMNLU, which is a real gap. So we can't award a winner here, and the scoreboard now reads K3 1, GLM 5, 2-0, 2 tests tied, heading into the last one. Test 4 is inference speed and API latency, and this is where things get very concrete very fast. If your model takes 237 seconds before it outputs a single token, your users are staring at a spinner and your pipeline times out. And if your output token cost is $15 per million, while a competitor charges $4.40, that's not a rounding error at scale. That's a budget conversation. Okay, so I looked at the artificial analysis numbers for K3 and the deep infra benchmark for GLM 5. And K3 comes in at 33 tokens per second with a time to first token of 237 seconds, while GLM 5 on Fireworks hits 212 tokens per second with a TTFT of 0.74 seconds. These are different model versions across different providers. So the comparison is directional rather than a clean apples to apples, but that gap is so striking. GLM 5.2 takes test 4. And honestly, the pricing alone would have done it, since output tokens at $4.40 per million versus K3's $15 is roughly 3.4 times cheaper. I was expecting the speed gap to be noticeable, but 212 versus 33 tokens per second is way more than I thought. And that ties the scoreboard K3 1, GLM 5, 2-1-2 tied. So where does Kimi K3 win? Agentic coding? Pretty clearly, SWE Marathon 42 versus 13 is a 29-point gap on the hardest long horizon coding test in the set, and it also leads on Deep WE, Program Bench, Frontiers WE, and Terminal Bench. It's also the only model here with a published independent long context accuracy score. AALC are 74.7%, ranked number 5 of 250 models overall on BenchLM. And where does GLM 5.2 win? Speed, cost, and availability. Up to 212 tokens per second versus K3's 33. Output tokens at $4.40 per million versus $15, so about 3.4 times cheaper at scale. And GLM 5 runs across at least 5 providers, while K3 is on one with documented rate limit errors. For production workloads, that availability gap is a real operational risk. So I went into this thinking K3 would run away with it on coding, and that'd be the whole story. But GLM 5.2 matched it on the scoreboard once. Speed and cost came in. Here's the decision rule. If you're doing deep agentic coding work and cost per task isn't your main constraint, go Kimi K3, and if you need reliable production inference with multi-provider availability and a lower output token bill, GLM 5.2 is probably the smarter pick.